funds rate increase faster than it ever has in the history ever since they've had a federal funds rate.
You do have an opportunity. If there's buyers listening to this and sellers, make sure your home is parade ready and priced appropriately.
Everything that's in the playbooks has to be done right now. Otherwise, you run the risk of sitting on the market closer to 68 days as opposed to 12. The cost to build a new home is going to go up probably around $20,000.
We were in negotiations, investing in real estate. They're winning, they're making money.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Estate Educators Podcast, where we provide the education you can build on. I am your host, Kevin Amolsch. Along with me, Mr. Danger Cooper, my co-host. If you are a first-time listener, please do us a favor. Give us a 5-star review. Share it with a friend. This is the Denver Market Pulse Update. So once a quarter, we get together with our close friend, Mr. Joe Massey, and we talk about what's going on in the economy, and then we dig into the Denver real estate market to try to help you and how it impacts you as a Denver real estate investor. So again, if you get some value out of this, quick 5-star review. So Coop, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for co-hosting.
Kevin, thank you as always. I love how hard you're trying to get this new nickname to stick. I don't think it's going to happen, but keep trying.
Okay, well, I'm going to blame Joe because he reminded me of the nickname from our last quarter. So Joe, that's your fault. Joe, welcome to the show, man.
Guys, it's always great to see you. You know, I'm optimistic with Justin's new nickname, Danger, that by the end of this episode, Kevin will have a new nickname for you. And then, you know, third quarter, maybe I'll get a nickname. Who knows?
Yeah, let's do it. We'll Danger and me will come up with something by the end of the episode here. So, Mr. Justin
Fluffy.
Danger Cooper, quickly tell us who you are, what you do, and then we'll let Joe introduce himself, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I'm Justin Cooper. I'm a senior loan officer at Pine Financial Group. We've been making hard money loans since 2008. I joined the company in 2011, and we've just been crushing some hard money loans, helping real estate investors get the financing they need for their fix and flips, for their new builds, for their commercial deals, for their rentals in the BRRRR strategy. I mean, that's what we do all day, every day, is lending on real estate. In addition to that, I also own a portfolio of properties myself. I've done fix and flips myself. I've helped build new construction projects, and I do some coaching from time to time, helping busy professionals buy their first rentals.
Cool. Well, welcome again. Thanks for co-hosting. Mr. Massey, an unidentified, no nickname Massey. Tell us about yourself, man.
Absolutely. My name is Joe Massey. I'm with Castle & Cook Mortgage and have been colleagues and business partners with my two esteemed co-hosts for 13, 14, 15 years now. And I have been in the mortgage business for 22. At the end of this month will be 23 years. Started in mortgage straight out of college. And what I do is long-term permanent financing. So listeners out there, you know, you would work with Pine if you're buying a fix and flip or you're buying a property that needs renovation. And then where I help is to give the financing to the end buyer purchasing your fix and flip. Or if you decide you're going to keep that property as a rental, I can give you financing on a 30-year fixed for you to keep that as a cash flowing rental property. So really excited to be here with you guys. You know, I think we mesh really well, that we do different things, but lots of synergy between our different loan portfolios. So thank you guys for having me as always.
Yeah, this is so much fun to do this with you every quarter. So appreciate you coming on.
Always.
So Coop, we were talking right before we hit record. What should we talk about in this very special Market Pulse episode? Where do you think we start, man?
I mean, there are so many things to talk about, so many changes. It feels like have happened since the last time we all got together. Obviously, the big one is Trump is now president. He's in office. And whether you like him, you love him, you hate him, it doesn't matter. He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. So we have seen a lot of changes. I think you can really see the difference between a business person versus a politician in office this time, because he's just getting after it, and he's really living up to everything he said he was going to. A big thing front and present for us right now seems to be tariffs. He is issuing a lot of tariffs. He is threatening a lot of tariffs. He is using tariffs, as a means to an end for other things. And a lot of these tariffs seem to be affecting us or can affect us in the real estate industry. So, that's what we were talking about just before we hopped on.
Cool. So I agree with you for the most part. I just want to say that Trump is still all over the place. Like love him or hate him, he's doing mostly what he said. I agree, but he also said he was going to do a tariff on China of 100%. Right? There was a point in his campaign that he was at like 25, then it went up to 60, and then the last I heard was like, well, I think it went to 100, then back down to 60. So sort of all over the place. The actual tariff was only 10%. So yes, he is implementing something, but it's not exactly what he said. So, Joe, what do you
Yep.
think?
You know,
Go ahead.
I agree 100%. I actually have a degree in economics, and so I like to believe that I understand tariffs maybe more than the average person on the street. But ultimately, tariffs are going to increase price for the consumer. They're going to increase construction material costs, and that is going to lead to increased home purchase costs. It's a very direct trickle down price. Now, the theory is if you have tariffs and everything from steel to lumber to wherever costs 25% more, well, we're going to build more sawmills and we're going to build more, I don't know where you make steel mills, I guess. We're going to build more of those here in the United States. We're going to bring that manufacturing home. Here's the challenge. That doesn't happen overnight. That takes years to build lumber mills, to build steel mills. So tariffs are in the short to medium term going to increase prices. In the long term, is it possible that they would bring prices down if manufacturing comes back to the United States? Yes, possible. But we're going to do a lot more of these podcasts before we would actually see those impacts if it happens. So be prepared for higher prices.
So, Coop, why don't you tell us, because we just jumped right in here, which is great. And what if the listener doesn't even know what a tariff is? I don't know how they wouldn't at this point because it's been all over the news. But tell us what a tariff is.
Yeah, you have definitely asked the wrong person, Kevin, but I appreciate it, and I'll give you my best effort here. So a tariff is, in a way, it's like a tax on the incoming materials, right? The point is to make, China's steel more expensive to make American steel seem more inexpensive, right? That's like the goal, and that's how, by having those price differences, to drive the traffic to the American, to the domestic product, right? Using more stuff, putting more Americans to work, those types of things. But it seems to backfire in many ways, right? Like Joe just said, if all of a sudden all this demand is going to the domestic, if the domestic can't keep up, well, the domestic is going to cost more, right? So we may have price increases, right, which is inflation happening to the domestic stuff, where we can't just automatically switch over because, as Joe has said, we don't have the production capability. So we're still going to have to be buying China stuff for a while as well, until hopefully we can cross over to the domestic, which means if we're buying the Chinese or whatever wherever the imports are from, we're paying higher prices on that as well. It's not that, I think the politicians like to say we're going to put tariffs on the Chinese, on the Canadian and Mexican stuff. That doesn't mean that China and Mexico are paying more. It means we're paying more for the Chinese and Mexican stuff, essentially, right? It's these things get added onto the price when the items are imported. And so either way, Americans are paying more for it. So hopefully, as Joe said, it trickles down to us saving money eventually and building more production domestically, but that's not going to happen overnight.
No.
Yeah, that's interesting. I agree with all of this. It's going to be inflationary. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It's either going to cost more because it's a tax, right? It's either going to cost more because the tax is passed from that country or that exporter into the consumer or onto the consumer, or as you guys both said, we'll start producing more, manufacturing more in the US. But here's my thought. If the US could do it at the same or lesser than we're paying right now, why aren't they? So even in the long run, it's going to be more expensive in the US to do that. So I still think even in the long run, it's going to be more expensive. Now, one possible benefit is it's going to hit the revenue line for the government. And I think that's part of Trump's plan.
I could see that, but that's yes. I'll go ahead and agree with that statement.
Okay. I mean, obviously he wants more jobs. He wants more, everything to stay more domestic. I mean, that's clearly the primary intent, but gosh, we're talking about extending tax benefits. We're talking about mass deportation and taking labor out of the market. And you got to have revenue to replace some of this stuff, right? So where is that revenue going to come from? You can't cut taxes and get more revenue, right? You got to try to figure out how to get it somewhere else.
Yep.
That's the only reason I say that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on.
What do you think it's going to do to the real estate investor, Joe?
I think the real estate investor, particularly fix and flip guys or anybody who's doing new development, needs to be prepared for higher labor costs and higher material costs is what I'm trying to say. If a large percentage of construction materials come from outside the United States, if those are now marked up 25%, that's going to increase your cost. If you have a large number of undocumented workers that are helping you build your properties and a large percentage of those people leave either voluntarily or involuntarily, you're going to have to A, take longer because you're going to have less people, or B, pay more to get the people that are still here to work for you. That's going to increase costs in both situations, which increase the cost of your fix and flip or increase the cost of your development. So now what do you have to do? You have to pass on a higher price to the end buyer or the end tenant. It's going to make it more difficult for a lot of people. And real estate investors need to be prepared for that. And we're going to talk a little bit here in a few moments about inventory and having your properties ready to be sold and pricing them properly. This is going to put a lot of pressure on prices and on margins.
Yeah, and I'm dying to get into that. So, but before we do, Coop, you said you had read an article or something right before we hit record here.
I've read several, but one in particular, some information from CoreLogic basically says home construction costs are probably going to go up between 4 to 6% in the next 12 months. And then specifically, items like appliances, lighting, and cabinets could go up between 10 and 20%. So, now this is a very broad and number, but basically the cost to build a new home is going to go up probably around $20,000. And so that's going to have real impacts for the housing supply, right? That we've been lacking for well over a decade. It's just going to make it even harder to build more homes and then certainly to build affordable homes.
Yeah. Affordable homes may be a thing of the past.
Yeah. So listen to a podcast this morning, actually, and they were talking about if you look back into the early 1900s, and a house might have cost $25,000. That was round number of what they were saying the median was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Today, well, if you adjust that for inflation, what the inflation rate was every year, today that would be about 200,000, a little under that for that same house. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the median, I don't know if you know this, Joe, but it is over 400,000.
Yeah. So nationwide, it's like, isn't it 415 or 418,000, something like that?
More than 2 times what that house should be worth just based on or adjusted for inflation alone. That's how unaffordable it is.
Yep.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And we see that, right? We see that when folks are talking about buying a home and they're a first-time buyer and interest rates are high, prices are high, taxes are high, insurance is high, HOA dues are high. The average median wage earner, whether it's a single person or a couple, they cannot afford as much as they once could because everything has gotten more expensive faster than their wages have gone up.
Yeah. And at this time, I'm glad you said this. At this time when they were quoting, this podcast was saying that at that time, the house was $25,000. The interest rate was 7.25%.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that far. The interest rate's not that far off today.
It's not that far from, everybody hates me right now because interest rates are 7%, but it's actually pretty normal if you look at the last 50 years. So I guess maybe, for the last 50 years, everybody who's had my job has been hated. But it's actually right on the average.
Yeah. So you do have higher rates now than you have the last 10 or 15 years, but historically they're pretty similar. And in this specific example, it's almost identical. It's just that the values have increased so darn fast. And we've seen that slow down significantly, which I think you're going to show us. But before we do that, look, CPI just came out. We have a dual mandate. If I was the Fed, I have a dual mandate. I got to keep employment numbers high. I got to keep inflation low. Very difficult because they counteract each other. So it's a very difficult position for them to be in. And they waged war on inflation, as we know. We saw the federal funds rate increase faster than it ever has in history, since they've had a federal funds rate. It never went up that fast. So they definitely were going right at inflation, and now they've backed off a little bit. But what just happened in the most recent report?
Inflation was up in January. I think it was the highest since August of 2023. It's the highest in the last 18 months.
And headline. So for the listener, headline is basically everything. So including energy, food, all of that. Headline's been going up, Joe and Coop, for the last 4 months, basically since their last rate cut, right?
Yep. The last rate cut was in November, I think. And yeah, inflation has continued to go up.
So I have the numbers right here. Headline inflation up from 2.9 to 3.0. Core, which excludes food and energy, from 3.2, it's up to 3.3. And the big part of that is energy, which has been the bright spot, it has been going down. Everyone keeps thinking that housing is going to bring inflation down, but that hasn't happened.
Nope.
Energy has been doing that, but now that's spiked. So I don't know what's going on here, man. How does this impact interest rates?
You know, I get this question a lot, probably 7 to 10 times a day. People think, hey, you know, the experts are predicting that interest rates are going to go down. Do you think interest rates are going to go down, Joe? Well, I'm no person to argue with Fannie Mae or the National Association of Realtors or the Mortgage Bankers Association, but I'm going to disagree. I don't see that there's anything that is going to push interest rates back to 2, 3, 4%. Certainly, I don't think there's a lot of things that are going to push interest rates to 5s or low 6s. I think that as a real estate investor, we need to be prepared for interest rates for the next 12 to 24 months to be between 6.5% and 7.5%. Some days it'll be a little bit better. Some days can be a little bit worse. But if you're waiting to buy investment properties, you're waiting to buy a house until rates are 5.5%, maybe 6%, you're going to be waiting for a long time. And something I want to touch on real quick, Kevin, that you said about inflation. And I think we've spoken about this on a prior podcast. Macroeconomics, my very first year in college in macroeconomics, there was a section about stimulating the economy through monetary policy, pumping money into the economy. Now, this is what we did in 2020 and 2021. When you stimulate the economy by putting a lot of money into the economy, every time, without fail, you will have increased inflation for roughly double the period of time that you pumped money into the economy. Now, we pumped money into the economy for 2 years, 2020 and 2021. What happened in 22, 23, 24, and 25? We have seen increased inflation. So we are 3 years into that 4-year expectation of high inflation. So don't be surprised if we have another full year in 2025 of high inflation, and maybe in 2026, inflation will normalize and maybe interest rates will come down a little bit. But don't plan for it today. It might happen. I could be wrong. You know, you guys can come back a year from now and come on here and say, oh my God, Joe was wrong. Rates are now at 5.5. I hope they are. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
I have so many things I want to say right now, but Coop, anything you want to jump in?
I mean, it just kind of makes me think, right, that interest rates are probably going to stay where they are. So if you're waiting on interest rates to drop, right, you're going to be waiting a long time. And then what we were saying earlier, what you were saying, Kevin, about inflation adjusted median home price should be what, 200,000, but it's actually 400,000, right? Whatever it is. So, you know, prices have been appreciating. So the longer everybody sits and waits, right? I mean, it just comes down to the old adage, time in the market is better than timing the market, right? So if you're thinking about it, or like, well, once interest rates come down or whatever it is, and I feel like we say this all the time, you know, buy that new primary residence now, buy your first rental property now, buy another rental property now, because things will just continue to appreciate, right? There's always a chance they don't. There's always a chance they're flat. There's always a chance they go down, you know, but everything that we've been talking about and everything we're hearing makes it sound like real estate prices are going to continue to go up, obviously over time. And we don't know that interest rates are going to go down. So even if you waited a year and they come down a little bit, is it worth it compared to what maybe the appreciated home price is? So, I mean, if you can afford it, you know, buy that house. You know, be smart and be, you know, diligent when you're doing that to make sure you can afford the house. But if that's something you're thinking about or dreaming about, I mean, there's still no better time than now, because tomorrow is just going to be better, I think.
I agree.
I think it's mostly flat, but I do agree with you. Joe, if you want to share your screen, and while you're doing that, let me share a couple of thoughts here, because I just want to piggyback on what you said, because everything you said, I 100% agree with. I do think that it's going to be 2 years or more before we see an interest rate that starts with a 5, and that's on the 30-year fixed. Very interesting. Mortgage rates dipped a little bit today, and then on the 30-year, but the 15-year went up. So that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a
But
whole, the yield curve is just don't even get me started.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing I do believe is, although it's not a direct correlation, there is a vague correlation between the overnight rate and the mortgage rate, and it's a very lagging. So I don't know what the lag is exactly. Maybe you could enlighten me a little bit more on that. But if we're going to see interest rates, the federal funds rate, the overnight rate or the short-term rate, if we're going to see that stay sticky, I wouldn't expect to see interest rates go down much. I think spreads, the yield spread, which I don't know if I want to get into, but that's going to be, it's going to stay above 2, I think. So you're not going to see a decrease in interest rates. Now, inflation, on the other hand, outside of the tight interest rate environment, which historically it hasn't been, but if you look at 10, 15 years, it is tight right now. In fact, it's higher. The interest rates are higher than the Fed wants them. Right? He's been very clear about that. So he being Powell, believes that he's restricting the economy with that interest rate. But outside of that, there's nothing that's going on that I know of that is deflationary. Everything is inflationary. We have money going into the economy because we have to pay record high interest on our debt. We pay more in interest on debt than we pay our military. It's the highest line item on our expense now. We have tariffs. We have deportation. We have no revenue from tax. I mean, tax cuts. This is all inflationary. So I would be very surprised if you see that 2% target hit anytime soon.
Completely agree. As a country, we borrow a lot of money, whether that's an individual, whether that's a government, we borrow a lot. The more money you borrow, the more interest you have to pay.
They borrow money to pay interest, and it's totally fine. I mean, that is the plan, right? They tell us they're doing that. So it's not like it's some hidden thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. We want to talk about some homes and condos and what's happening here in Denver.
Yeah. So a lot of people, as you remember, Joe, are not looking at what we're looking at here. So we got to be very detailed when we're explaining what we're looking at.
Yes, sir. So I'm going to cover, the first slide we have is very busy. So listeners, you're not missing a whole lot. But the big thing I want to point out is average sales price of homes. All right. So fourth quarter of 2024 versus fourth quarter of 2023, we see that home prices increased roughly 1% in the Denver metro area. Now, condo prices down roughly 5%. So we often talk about real estate goes up, and that's true, it does over time, but in short intervals, you will see sometimes some price depreciation. And that's actually what we've experienced in condos over the last 12 months in the Denver metro area. A couple of reasons for that: increased homeowners insurance and increased HOA dues. When HOA dues go up and your prices are not going up at the same rate, and interest rates are going up, HOA dues are causing people to have to buy a little bit of a lower price range in order to afford the same property. That pushes property prices down. And that's exactly what condos are experiencing right now. And let's look at that on a chart. So again, for the listeners out there, we have a chart that tracks home price appreciation all the way back to 1973. It tracks homes and condos. You see a dip from, the 2008 financial crisis. You see a really strong run up during COVID. After COVID, prices were relatively flat for about a year, and then we see just a little bit of a 1% increase last year. And then for condos, you see that prices have flattened / gone down a little bit. Now, if you were to go back maybe 6 to 9 months to this quarterly update, one of the big questions used to be, is there going to be a foreclosure crisis? Are we going to see prices come down 20%, 30%, 50%? The answer to that is no. That was the answer we gave you 6 or 9 months ago. That answer is still true. There's not anything that's going to push prices down materially, 20, 30, 40%, but we are seeing some softening in those condo markets simply because HOA dues have gone up. So Justin, Kevin, anything to add?
Yeah, I recently, the same podcast actually that I was just talking about, talked about this, the insurance costs and how high it's going up. And it's obviously it's spread out over a lot of people, and it's primarily because of the natural disasters. But Colorado ranks very high. In fact, from 2019 till today, it's over 50% increase in insurance in Colorado.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. My car insurance went up 50% just in 12 months. So, of course I had to go get new car insurance because I was like, I'm a good driver. My car's a year older. Why is it going up 50%? They were like, yeah, everything's just more expensive. So I had to go shop for car insurance. So this is a good reminder. If your insurance is going up, research, because it doesn't have to go up. But as a whole, you're spot on, Kevin. We're seeing massive increases in Colorado.
This episode is brought to you by Pine Financial Group. Pine Financial is a private lender specializing in short-term rehab lending to real estate investors. Got a property that needs some love? We can help. We are able to offer funding solutions because we raise private money from individual investors. With more than 15 years of experience, Pine offers passive investors an alternative that provides stability, consistency, and security to your portfolio. If you like real estate but want to avoid the ups and downs and effort, a Pine mortgage fund could be a perfect fit for you. Accredited investors will experience an 8% preferred return and profit sharing. Diversify your portfolio out of Wall Street and into Main Street with a Pine Financial Group mortgage fund. Get more information at pinefinancialgroup.com. That's pinefinancialgroup.com.
So let's talk about, let me get to my next slide here, inventory. All right, so this chart is a very busy chart. So those of you that are seeing this, what I want you to look at is this blue line. Those of you that are not seeing it, we have inventory levels from 2019 all the way until 2024. And you see that inventory in the Denver metro area peaked in September of 2024 at roughly 11,000 units for sale. Now, the lowest we've had was back in January of 2022. We had only about 1,000 homes for sale in the Denver metro area. So that means that there are 11 times more homes on the market in late 2024 than there were in early 2022. So the point there, buyers have more choices. So if you're a fix and flip investor or you're a developer, in the past, you could list a property, have so-so photos, maybe cut a few corners, and you're going to get your list price plus maybe 3, 5, 7, even 10%. That is not necessarily true anymore. We are seeing some competitive bidding on properties, but they are really primo properties. There's a lot more for buyers to choose from right now. So if you're listing a property, you need to have great photos. You can't cut any corners. You need to make sure that you are making sure this is a top-notch, ready-to-go property, or else it's going to sit for a while. And Kevin, let me ask you, are you seeing once somebody finishes a fix and flip, are those properties sitting on the market a little bit longer and it's taking longer for them to get your loans paid off?
Oh, for sure. We're seeing delays in the construction primarily because of labor, but we're also seeing them sit on the market longer, and that's proven in the data. I think you're showing that to us right now, but I mean, you could look at days on market and months of inventory, and you could see that there's been an impact. Coop, what are you seeing?
Yeah, 100% accurate. Properties are just taking longer. Even the good quality ones, right? They're taking longer to move. I was just actually at lunch with a few buddies here today, and as I was driving through the neighborhood, I went through, I noticed two listing signs in front of properties, one of which was brand new, maybe only on the property for less than a month, already under contract, right? They've already got the sign saying it's under contract. The other one, that property has been on the market for what feels like at least 6 months, and I've looked at properties, right? I'm stalking my neighborhood all the time, right? What's moving, what's not moving, what does it look like? And there's a stark difference in the quality of those two homes, right? So, I mean, I think it just kind of goes back to the old, you got to be the best property on the market, right, for a fair price. And obviously the fair price is changing these days, right? So you gotta be constantly reevaluating where you should be listing your property at. But you really got to pay attention to the little details. You got to pay attention to, the listing and how we're negotiating and what we're offering, right? Offering to help buy down rates and all these other things. You really got to try and find these little ways to incentivize buyers to bite on your property. But even if you're doing all those things, you still got to be building in extra holding costs. You got to be planning on holding the properties longer.
Completely agree. Now, speaking of that, properties that are sitting on the market longer and there's more properties available, we have another very busy chart here, but I want you to focus on the purple line at the bottom. And for the listeners, this is the showings per active listing in the Denver metro area. And the average number of showings that a home gets when it's listed as of December, this is the most recent data that we have, so about 40 days ago, the average home was getting just over 5 showings a month. In the peak of the COVID craziness in 2022, in February, the average home was getting 24 showings a month. All right. So now, if you're only getting 5 showings a month on your property, Justin, let me ask you, is every showing very important?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely, right? So you're working, you've got your property listed, all of a sudden you get a showing request that, hey, we need to show the property in 2 hours. I know it's a pain in the neck, but you need to jump up off the couch. You need to get up, clean the house, get the dog out of the house, take the kids to the park, have that property parade ready, because there are fewer and fewer showings, which is a function of lower buyers that are out there, fewer buyers that we touched on with affordability, and a function of more inventory available. Now, we're not in a buyer's market yet, but it's getting close to a balanced market, and sellers just don't have as much push and control as they did 2 or 3 years ago. So if you have a showing, you might not get a ton this month. Make sure you have the property ready to go. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And that I love the months of inventory. And I think what you're saying is very well illustrated in those statistics. So I don't know if you have those.
In the fourth quarter was 1.7 months of inventory. For condos was 2.6 months of inventory, right? So still historically low, but not, oh my God, the seller has 100% of the power low. And you see that through third and fourth quarter, through second and third quarter, it was actually increased almost to 3 months of inventory. So the fourth quarter slowdown for month of inventory or decrease was just a function of the holidays. Not as many transactions happen, not as many properties are listed during Christmas. But don't be surprised if we see months of inventory begin to go up as we get into the spring selling season, because more people are going to be listing their homes. So I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah. So, and this is like when I'm looking at those for, you say Denver Metro, are you talking about like what, the 7-county metro? Or
7-county metro area. Yep.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now, with that, with showings being very important, let's talk just a little bit about pricing. All right. Over the past 12 months, homes that were priced right and did not require a price reduction sold an average of 12 days on market. Mispriced homes that required a reduction needed 68 days on market on average, 5 times longer to get a contract. All right. And so you can really determine, where are you at on this graph? All right. If you're priced right, you're going to sell your property very, very rapidly on average within 12 days. If you need a price reduction, it's going to take you a lot longer to sell your property, as much as 60, 75, maybe even 80 days. And the average of the market is right in the middle, roughly 40 days on market. And the way you can really determine that is look at what's going on with the activity. If you're not getting any showings and you're only getting people driving by or just doing online views, you probably have your price way too high. If you're getting low or infrequent showings, you're probably getting close. You're overpriced, but not too bad. If you're getting a lot of showings but no offers, you're probably within about a 5% of the appropriate price. And if you're receiving offers, you know that your property is priced correctly. So look at the activity on your listings. Fix and flip and developer investors that are listening to this, look at the activity that you're getting. If you're not getting any showings, look at your price, because that's probably where the problem is.
I love this. I don't think I've ever seen this displayed like this, Joe. Like 13%, you're overpriced 13% if this is what's happening. This is really interesting.
Yeah.
We talk about pricing strategy a lot in the office because our clients shoot for the moon. So when you shoot for the moon and you're 13% over or even higher than that, we see, Joe, you're going to sit on the market 2 months longer than somebody who priced it correctly. And you're still going to sell the price. You're still going to sell it for the price.
Right.
Or
And
quite honestly, I would make the argument that if you overprice it, your final price that you end up getting is lower than you would have got if you would have priced it correctly.
your carrying costs are more, right? Your carrying costs, let's just average 1% a month, right? Every 1 month, that's 1% of that property price that goes out the door on your carrying costs. So it's so important to have your property priced properly and parade ready, make every showing great, and get that thing sold. So that's the main message that I want to give to our investors today. And I did want to comment, thank you very much for the compliment on this slide. My good buddy and business partner, Lon Welsh, over at Your Castle Real Estate and Ironton Capital, he and I worked together on a lot of these slides, and he put this one together for us. And you're right, I think this one is new, that we've only had for about the last, I don't know, maybe 90 days. So I'm glad you like this slide. I'll pass that along to Lon.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Danger, you've been in the business a while. You've done several fix and flips. I'm curious your opinion on this. If we're talking about pricing strategy, we want it to be parade home ready. I agree with Joe 100%. And I know some people, like when the market's hot, some people will list a market or list it before it's done and try to pre-sell. That's not a good idea right now.
I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah,
Bad
I
idea.
agree. That was something I was thinking. Like you gotta wait until the property is 100% complete to list it, right? Otherwise, people can't get in there. They're not getting the hands on it, right? They're not smelling the fresh baked cookies or whatever you're doing at your showings, right? And so the property's going to sit and it's going to get stale. You got to wait till it's 100%. It's got to be prime for the market. And you got to be attentive, right? You got to be on top of it. You got to be following up with these showings. You got to do, everything that's in the playbooks has to be done right now. Otherwise, you run that risk of sitting on the market closer to 68 days as opposed to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
yeah,
and the stale listing argument is real because perception's reality. And if a property is sitting in the MLS for any amount of time, there's automatically, because inventory is still low, guys, property should still be selling. So if it's sitting in the MLS, then the perception is something's wrong with it, right? So that devalues the real estate. That's why I'm saying you might end up getting less for your property if you price it incorrectly. But Coop, my question to you is, as a pricing strategy, what do you think about pricing it even under what you think you're going to get?
I mean, that's certainly, to me, that feels a little risky right now because there's not a massive amount of buyers, right? If there were, properties would be moving faster. I love the idea in concept because hopefully if we price it lower than it should be, we'll get more eyeballs on it and then possibly get into a bidding war. But I don't know if we're really having bidding wars right now or not enough to where that would be my strategy, right? So I think it depends on where you're coming from, right? If you've had some delays and overages and the deal's taking longer than it should have, then yeah, price it under it, right? Even though at that point you'd need to maximize the price as much as you can, but the way you're going to maximize that profit at that point is by getting out as fast as possible, right? If you shoot for the moon on the price, it's going to sit longer and you're going to lose more money because ultimately you'll wind up at the price it's going to be at and you'll have your holding costs. But if you price it under where you think the market is, you should get a contract faster. So I think if it's at that point, I think you should absolutely consider it as a way to just get out of the deal and move on to the next one. And really, by doing that, in a way, you're maximizing your profit.
Yep.
What do you think, Massey?
I completely agree. Overpricing a property is very dangerous. Underpricing a property, while risky, not as dangerous. If I have a property that is in an area that should be selling for $600,000 and I list it for $650,000, I may have to trickle down over time. But if I were to list that property for $500,000 and everybody's looking in that area and they're like, oh my God, this property is going at $500,000. We have to go over there. We have to look at it. And there's a line of people out the door. That property is likely to be bid up pretty darn close to the market price, hopefully $600,000. Now, that can be risky, right? Because maybe everybody comes in and says, oh, we're just going to pay only $500,000. Here's the important point. You don't have to take that offer. You can counter and say, hey, we still want $575,000 or $550,000, or we have other offers, or whatever it is. You can still negotiate. Just because it's listed at this price doesn't mean you have to accept that price.
Yeah, no, I love it. I tend to agree more with you, Joe, that it's safer. I know, Coop, you believe that that's risky, and I guess I could agree with that too.
No, I like what Joe said. I think pricing low is less risky than overpricing it.
Yes.
Overpricing is more risky.
Yes.
Right.
And if you have a good agent, so this is a strategy you discuss with your real estate agent, right? And you guys have to decide how to approach it as a team. But if you have a good agent, they can communicate that, right, Joe? Like, look, we're getting a ton of showings, more than we were expecting. We're no longer taking 550.
Right.
If you want to offer higher, great. Otherwise, we're going to keep seeing what we're going to get.
That's exactly right.
You can communicate that.
Yeah, representation, I've always said, is hyper important. And I think it's just as important now, maybe more important when you have more listing competition.
Yeah.
Now,
Cool. Go ahead.
let's talk about, this one is a little bit of a negative slide. The number of people expecting to buy a home also has been dropping, all right? And the recent spike in interest rates has probably caused that. So we saw in December a really big drop off on the number of people that have the intention of purchasing a property. And we also have a survey here. The survey shows that renters, very few of them expect to buy in the near future. So if we go back and we look at 2015, greater than 52% of renters were planning to purchase a property within the next 12 months. Now renters, less than 40%, within the next 3 years. So in 2015, 53% of renters were expected to purchase a property within the next 3 years. Currently, 2024 into 2025, 40% of renters are expecting to purchase a property in the next 3 years. Guys, that is a massive drop off when you figure there's approximately 120 million renters in the United States, and that went down by 13%. That's what, 14.4 million people that are not planning to buy a home in the next 3 years. That's a really big drag on the number of transactions that are going to occur. And again, sticking with our theme, if I'm an investor, I know there's fewer people looking at my property. I want to make sure it's parade ready and appropriately priced. You guys agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, 100% agree.
Agree.
And then the very last slide that I've got, very busy chart. We're not going to go through all of this, but for those of you that are listening, on the left-hand side, we have the mortgage application purchase index. And what you see is at mortgage applications are at a 9-year low, and they're 40% below the 9-year average. All right. Their mortgage applications are 40% lower than they have been in the last 9 years. So those two slides go hand in hand. Fewer renters wanting to become homeowners, fewer people applying for mortgages, whether they're first-time buyers or move-up buyers. A lot of people are kind of just huddled in their home or in their apartment saying, I'm going to wait and see what happens, which I can respect. But I want to go back to something that Justin said really, really early in this conversation. Buy a home now, because homes appreciate. Go back and look at that price of a home in 1900 was $25,000. Now it's $400,000. Now, no, you're probably not going to live to be 125 years old, but over the next 25, 30, maybe 40 years, the value of that home is likely to go up. And you don't want to be looking in the mirror 5 or 10 or 15 years from now saying, boy, I really wish I would have bought a home in 2025.
Yeah. So let's elaborate here a little bit. I know we're running short on time here, Joe, but if everything you're saying, assuming everything you're saying is true, which I know it is,
I try not to lie.
it's what the missing piece here is build to rent and new apartments coming online.
Mhm.
But based on what I'm looking at, what you're showing me right now, it feels like rents should be increasing. What the problem that real estate investors are having right now is the values of the properties outpace the rental increase. So it's very difficult to have cash flow because the rents just have not been keeping up with what it's costing to buy an investment. So what's your opinion here? Do you think that rents will start to go up if people are choosing not to buy?
So the missing piece is household formation. Did you guys, and I don't have a slide for this, but did you know that household formation is actually on the decline? What I mean by that, let's say Justin and I are roommates and he is going to get married and he moves out. Well, I still live here and that's a household. He moves out. That's now a new household. Well, what's happening right now, because homes are unaffordable, rent is also very expensive, is the opposite. Justin lives in his apartment. I live in my apartment and we're buddies. And we're like, man, I can't afford my next rent increase. He says, I can't either. Let's move in as roommates and get a 2-bedroom. and household formation is going down, which is giving us flat to slightly increasing rental rates, but not a big increase. So that's the missing piece there. It's household formation, which is just simply people moving in with one another. The number of households is going down, not going up.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there's a ton of apartments coming online, and there's build to rent communities because it's hard to profit on new construction projects with the cost of construction. So builders are strategically deciding to keep their neighborhoods and rent them out for a while.
Yep.
So there's a lot of inventory in the rental market as well. But I was just curious your thought based on no one's moving. If everyone's going to stay renting, then you would think that would put pressure on pricing.
That would be true if household formation were continuing to increase. Because household formation is going down, or even if it stays flat, rental appreciation will stay flat.
We still have a net positive migration though, don't we?
In Colorado, yes, we do.
So we have that going for us.
Yeah, so we're getting more people. They're just moving in with one another. They're not getting separate homes.
Cool. What else you got?
That's everything I wanted to cover. You know, the big message from my preparation is inventory is up. There's fewer buyers than we would like. So buyers, you do have an opportunity if there's buyers listening to this, and sellers, make sure your home is parade ready and priced appropriately.
What you thinking, Coop?
Going back to the beginning of our conversation around tariffs, as investors, we need to be nimble. We need to be buying right, and we need to really be sharpening our pencils when it comes to our repair budgets, whether it be, averaging more money per line item or bigger contingencies, or just offering less on our purchase prices, knowing that our scope of work somehow is going to get increased. And our holding time, right? I mean, Kevin, you mentioned this a few times, but we didn't really dive into it. Deportations are, on the rise. We'll say that. And we've had clients call us and tell us that, hey, this project's going to take longer because my crews will not work during the day. They're too scared of ICE coming by and picking people up. So they're working nights and weekends, or even if they're not, just hiding to avoid being deported, people just are being deported. And so there is less people to do this, which means we have to find new crews. We may have to pay more for our crews, right? Your project is going to take longer to get done. So whatever it is, you really got to be looking at your numbers. You really got to pay attention to the analysis before you're buying. If you're already in a deal, time is money, right? Do whatever you can to get out of your deal, because all of these things will continue to evolve and continue to hit your profit. So really make sure you're running your numbers and you're paying attention to all these things when you're making offers on your next deals.
I agree.
I couldn't have said it better, man. I 100% agree. I guess I'll close with what I'm seeing other investors doing right now, because I think it's important for the listener and the viewer on YouTube to kind of understand what other investors that are successful, what they're doing. Cash flow is hard. Okay. It's especially in Denver. I don't know, and I don't want to be pessimist here. I don't know that you're going to be finding cash flow right now. Now, if you're going to invest for the long haul, real estate is still the best investment in my personal opinion. It's going to be the most stable and steady, and it's going to guarantee wealth. Okay, so I do believe that, but you might have to absorb a little bit of negative cash flow, which sounds crazy coming from me because I do not like buying assets that cash flow negative, because that's very, very dangerous. An alternative is you could put more money down, go directly to Joe, and cash flow that way. Your cash on cash returns will be lower, but your overall returns will still stay high because of all the other benefits with real estate. With both of those things said, I am seeing people move more to the passive investing side, because when you could buy higher dollar amount properties, you can cash flow better. The ratio between the rents and the prices improves as the dollar amount goes up. So for example, if I buy an 8-unit building, that will cash flow better than a single family home. And the reason for that is less buyers for an 8-unit. So that drives prices down. What if you can't afford the down payment on an 8-unit or a 20-unit or a 50-unit or a commercial asset? you get involved with you put a group together and then you go on and buy the property together. So we're seeing an increase in syndication type deals. Now we have a lot of information on syndications, how to stay safe, all of that on the YouTube channel. So I think syndications are smart, but there is risk. I've invested in many of those, and a handful, especially through COVID, required capital calls, which is a call to the investors to put more money in. Now I'm investing in something to get a return, not to put more money in, right? So there is some risk with syndication deals. An alternative to that, if you're willing to give up a little bit on your return, but you want some very steady income, would be investing in real estate debt, which I know both of you guys have done. So originating notes, buying notes, investing in mortgage funds, those types of investments are a good way to cash flow right now while we wait and kind of see what's going to happen. So we're seeing investors, especially in our mortgage funds, a lot of people are selling rental properties and coming over onto the debt side, the good side, right? So we are seeing those couple of things. So I just wanted to point that out. If you guys are interested if anyone is interested in debt investing, we don't do syndication, so I can't help you there. But if you're interested in the debt passive side, just pinefinancialgroup.com. With all I just laid out there, fellas, what do you guys think? Anything you want to add to that?
I completely agree. Cash flow is hard. I looked at a property myself just earlier this week. It was a $290,000 condo right next door to a complex that I already have 2 investments in. I couldn't make it work. HOAs were $600 a month. It's only going to rent for about $1,850. It was negative cash flow. And I'm like, I can't do it. So that money will probably go into a passive investment similar to the Pine Financial Fund, or it actually probably will go into the Pine Financial Fund. Yeah, cash flow is hard right now. It is, but doesn't mean it's impossible. And the other thing that I would add is if you're putting, let's say 20 or 25% down, and maybe you're going to lose $200 a month, let's say. Well, what's going to happen in year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5? Your rents are going to go up. And we have an investment property spreadsheet that you guys have seen, we've looked at many times. You can project, when is this property going to be cash flow neutral? And then you can say, all right, if it's going to be cash flow neutral in 3 years, and I've got to pay $200 a month, that's $2,400 a year times 3 more years, that's $7,200 that I've got to be paying to get this property until it's cash flow neutral. If I take that $7,200 and put that money down today, does it become cash flow neutral today? And the answer to that is probably not. If I'm losing $200 a month, I probably need to put down about another $30,000 to maybe $50,000 to get that property to cash flow. So the answer is yes, put down a larger down payment and you can cash flow today, or understand that you're going to have negative cash flow for the next couple of years, but that negative cash flow is likely a lower dollar amount than putting down that full spread to get to cash flow neutral. So I call that deferred down payment, and it's lower than actually making that down payment today most of the time. And if you have questions on that, or you have a specific property, call me and I'll look at it and go through the analysis with you.
Cool. Well, speaking of that, how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my phone number is 303-809-7769. You can email me, jmassey@castlecookmortgage.com. And just real quick, I did just write a brand new book called The Mortgage Escape Plan. It is how to pay off your loan in 7 to 10 years, not 30. And this is something I put together because of exactly what we're discussing right now, is a lot of people are finding it difficult to invest into properties. They're finding a difficult time of where to place their money. And a lot of people are calling me and saying, Joe, I just want to pay off my home faster. How do I do that? So there's 9 chapters in this book with 9 different ways that you can pay off your home. And there's more to it than just simply put more towards the principal. There's actually a lot of other ways, even working with Pine Financial, that you can pay off your home a heck of a lot faster using some things like offset accounts and whatnot. So if you want to copy that, check it out on Amazon. It's The Mortgage Escape Plan. So thank you for letting me advertise that. I sure appreciate the time.
No problem. Do you think, Joe, that your cash flow would improve after 7 years if you paid off your mortgage in 7 years?
I believe it would. Yes. I would have to double check the spreadsheet, but yes, if the mortgage is paid off in 7 years, your cash flow will improve.
Yeah, got it. All right, Coop, anything you want to throw in here, add, and then how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, just, buckle up and hold on tight. We're not even a full month into Trump's presidency, and it's been a wild ride. So, I would prepare for at least, a full year of this, right? And what this is, I don't know, right? We're gonna figure it out, and we got to be able to roll with the punches and ride the roller coaster of it. But regardless, don't stop buying properties. Don't sit on the sidelines. Just do more diligence, pay more attention, sharpen your pencil, but continue to take action. That's what I would say. And if part of taking action would be doing a fix and flip and you need to borrow some money, I mean, that's exactly what I do all day and every day is talking to folks about that. So you can reach out to me. My cell phone number is 303-916-5366. You can email me. It's justin@pinefinancialgroup.com, or you can always just check out our website, pinefinancialgroup.com.
Great. I couldn't have said that better. I agree. So I know you got some value out of this one, guys. This was a lot of fun. 5-star review. Help us out, man. We're trying to build a community here to help more real estate investors. So that would be great. So Coop, Danger, and Mr. Joe Massey, thank you so much for your time. I know it's a lot of fun and we loved getting together anyway, but there's other things you could have been doing and you chose to hang out here. So really appreciate it. And for the listener, same. You have lots of podcast options and you chose to tune in here. I really, really do appreciate that. So thank you. And I hope you make this day a great one. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please be sure to follow and leave us a review. Oh yeah, and tell a friend.